Jake Morrison stood at attention in the cramped briefing room, his dress uniform still stiff and new. The holographic display in front of him showed a beautiful purple planet with 3 moons. His commanding officer, a gray-haired woman named Captain Linda Hayes, watched him with tired eyes. "You'll be representing Earth at the Galactic Council Summit on Valoria," she said. "It's mostly ceremonial. Stand around, look professional. Don't start any incidents." Jake nodded. At 23 years old, he was the youngest person ever chosen for this assignment. He had graduated from the Interstellar Defense Academy just 2 months ago. Most of his classmates were still waiting for their first postings. He knew he was lucky, even if the job sounded boring. "Remember, we're the new kids in the galaxy," Captain Hayes continued. "Most of these species have been traveling through space for thousands of years. We've only had faster-than-light travel for 30 years. They see us as children playing with grown-up toys." "I understand, ma'am," Jake said. "Do you?" She leaned forward. "These aliens look down on us, Morrison. They think we're primitive. Your job is to smile, be polite, and prove them wrong through your behavior. Can you handle that?" "Yes, ma'am." 3 days later, Jake stepped off the transport ship onto Valoria. The planet was unlike anything he had ever seen. The sky was a deep violet color, and the buildings seemed to grow out of the ground like enormous crystals. Creatures of every shape and size walked through the spaceport. Some had 4 arms, some had wings, and some looked like walking plants. Jake adjusted his uniform and followed the signs to the summit compound. The main building was massive, with walls that shimmered like water. Guards stood at every entrance. They were tall, muscular beings with gray skin and 4 arms each. Their eyes tracked Jake as he approached, and he could see the amusement in their faces. "Human?" one guard asked, his voice deep and rumbling. "Yes, sir. Jake Morrison, Earth delegation." The guard laughed. It sounded like rocks grinding together. Earth sent a child to guard their interests? How amusing. He waved Jake through without checking his credentials. Jake kept his face neutral and walked inside. He had dealt with worse insults during his time in the Marines. At least these aliens didn't shoot at him. The opening ceremony was held in a hall so large that Jake couldn't see the ceiling. Hundreds of beings filled the space, representing dozens of species from across the galaxy. Jake found the small section reserved for Earth's delegation. There were only 5 humans present, including himself. They looked tiny compared to the other groups. That's when he first saw Princess Lorana. She entered the hall like she owned it, which, in a way, she did. The Veloxian royal family controlled 3 star systems and had more wealth than most planets. Lorana wore flowing robes that changed colors as she moved, shifting from deep blue to silver to gold. Her skin was pale and smooth, and her eyes were larger than human eyes, giving her an elegant, almost delicate appearance. She made her way through the crowd, greeting various delegates with practiced ease. When she reached the Earth section, she paused. Her eyes settled on Jake, and she smiled. It was a kind smile, but Jake recognized the look behind it. He had seen it before on the faces of drill instructors who thought new recruits were cute. "You must be Earth's security representative," Lorana said. Her voice was musical, with an accent that Jake couldn't place. "How wonderful that they sent someone so young and enthusiastic. Princess Lorana. It's an honor to meet you," Jake replied with a slight bow. He had studied the proper protocols for greeting Veloxian royalty. "Oh, how formal." She seemed delighted. "Please. There's no need for such stiffness. We're all friends here." She gestured around the hall. "Well, mostly friends. You'll find that galactic politics can be complicated, but I'm sure your superiors explained everything to you. They gave me a thorough briefing, Your Highness." "I'm sure they did." Lirana's smile widened. "Tell me, is this your first time off Earth?" "No, Your Highness. I've served on 3 different colonies." "How brave." She said it the way someone might compliment a child for tying their shoes. "The colonies are relatively safe, of course, but I'm sure it felt like quite an adventure. Valoria is very different from the frontier worlds. Much more civilized." Before Jake could respond, a loud voice boomed across the hall. Is this the human security force I've heard so much about? A massive figure pushed through the crowd. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 thick arms and gray, rock-like skin. Scars covered his face and arms, and his eyes were the color of fresh blood. This was Commander Vex, leader of the Kraggoth warriors. The Kraggoth were famous across the galaxy as the most fearsome fighters available for hire. "I am Commander Vex," the giant said, looking down at Jake. "I command a force of 500 elite warriors, each one capable of killing a dozen enemies before falling, and Earth sends one small human to provide security." He laughed, and several other Kraggoth nearby joined in. "Tell me, little human, what exactly do you plan to protect anyone from?" Jake met the commander's gaze without flinching. "Whatever needs protecting from, sir." Vex's laughter grew louder. Such confidence. Such bravery. Or perhaps, such foolishness. He turned to Princess Lorana. "Your Highness, I hope you don't plan to rely on this human if there's actual danger. My warriors would be happy to provide real security." "That's very kind of you, Commander," Lorana said, her diplomatic smile never wavering. She glanced at Jake with what looked like sympathy. "Though I'm certain young Morrison here will do his best." "His best?" Vex repeated, still chuckling. He clapped one massive hand on Jake's shoulder, nearly knocking him off balance. "Yes, I'm sure he will. Humans are nothing if not determined, even when they're out of their depth." With that, the commander moved on to greet other delegates. Princess Lorana lowered her voice. "Don't take Commander Vex too seriously. He's like that with everyone he considers beneath him, which is almost everyone. The Kraggoth have a very rigid sense of hierarchy." "I understand, Your Highness." "Good." She patted his arm gently. "Just stay close during the official events. Try not to wander off, and everything will be fine. Think of this as a learning experience. We were all rookies once after all." With another kind smile, Princess Lorana moved on to greet other delegates. Jake watched her go, then took his position near the wall where security personnel were supposed to stand. Around him, alien guards from a dozen different species stood at their posts. They were all bigger than him, more heavily armed, and clearly more experienced. But Jake didn't mind. He had learned a long time ago that appearances could be deceiving. Let them think he was just a rookie. Let them think humans were weak and inexperienced. He would do his job, and if trouble came, he would deal with it the way he had been trained to deal with everything, one step at a time. The first 2 days of the summit passed without incident. Jake stood at his assigned posts, attended the required meetings, and did his job. The other security personnel mostly ignored him. The delegates treated him like a piece of furniture. Only Princess Lorana acknowledged him regularly, always with that same kind, slightly amused smile. On the morning of the 3rd day, Jake received an unexpected message. Princess Lorana was inviting selected delegates to her family's private nature reserve in Valoria's northern continent. It was a tradition, the message explained, meant to build relationships away from the formal atmosphere of the summit. Jake's name was on the guest list. He packed his gear carefully. The message had mentioned that the reserve contained dangerous wildlife, though it assured guests that advanced barrier technology kept everything perfectly safe. Jake brought his standard sidearm and a few other items that might prove useful. Old habits from his Marine days. The transport to the reserve took an hour. Jake sat quietly while the other guests talked and laughed. There were 10 delegates total, plus their security personnel. Commander Vex was there with 3 of his Kraggoth warriors. A slug-like creature named Collector Toth represented the merchant guilds. Several others came from species Jake didn't recognize. Princess Lorana greeted them at the landing platform. Behind her, Jake could see dense forest stretching for miles. The trees were enormous, with black bark and silver leaves. Strange sounds echoed from the depths of the woods. "Welcome to my family's reserve," Lorana said warmly. "This land has been protected for over 2,000 years. The creatures here are the last of their kind, preserved as they were in ancient times." She gestured toward the forest. Some of you have expressed interest in hunting. We have a selection of weapons available, and our guides will ensure your safety. Commander Vex grinned, showing his sharp teeth. Finally, some entertainment. I've hunted on 100 worlds, Princess. I look forward to adding Veloxian beasts to my collection. I'm sure you'll find them challenging, Lyrana replied. She looked at Jake. Will you be joining the hunt, Morrison? If that's acceptable, Your Highness. Of course, though I should warn you, these creatures are quite dangerous. Even with the safety barriers, hunting can be intense. Perhaps you'd prefer to stay at the lodge with some of the other guests? Jake shook his head. I'll come along. Thank you. Lyrana's expression softened with concern. Well, do stay close to the group. And if things get too overwhelming, don't hesitate to return to the lodge. The hunting party set out an hour later. Jake carried a rifle provided by the reserve staff. It was a decent weapon, though not as good as the ones he had used in the Marines. The other hunters carried various weapons, from energy rifles to traditional projectile guns. Commander Vex carried what looked like a small cannon. Their guide was a Veloxian named Keeper Sorn. He was older than Lyrana, with silver markings on his face that indicated age and wisdom. He led them into the forest along a well-marked trail. The barriers extend for 50 miles in all directions, Sorn explained. They generate a field that prevents the more dangerous predators from reaching the inner zones where we walk. However, we may still encounter smaller creatures. Please follow my instructions at all times. Commander Vex laughed. Barriers and safety zones. Where's the real danger in that? The barriers are necessary, Commander, Sorn said seriously. Without them, we would not survive an hour in this forest. The apex predators here are not like creatures on other worlds. They walked for 2 hours, seeing various animals along the way. Most fled when they sensed the group approaching. Jake noticed tracks in the soft earth, some larger than his entire body. He kept his rifle ready, his eyes scanning the forest constantly. Then Keeper Sorn's communication device made a harsh beeping sound. He stopped walking and pulled it from his belt. His face went pale as he read the display. We need to return to the lodge immediately, he said, his voice tight with worry. Why? Commander Vex demanded. We haven't caught anything yet. The barrier system is failing. Multiple generators have gone offline. We need to evacuate the hunting grounds right now. Princess Lyrana, who had been walking near the back of the group, moved forward quickly. Failing? How is that possible? These systems are maintained daily. I don't know, Your Highness, but the alerts are genuine. We have perhaps 10 minutes before the barriers collapse completely. The group started moving back toward the lodge at a faster pace. Commander Vex and his warriors took point, weapons ready. Jake moved to Princess Lyrana's side, positioning himself between her and the forest. This is probably just a false alarm, Lyrana said, though her voice carried uncertainty. Our systems are very reliable. Jake didn't respond. He was listening to the forest. The normal sounds of birds and insects had stopped. That was never a good sign. They were halfway back to the lodge when Keeper Sorn's device let out a long, piercing alarm. The barriers are down, he shouted. Run! The group broke into a sprint. Jake grabbed Princess Lyrana's arm, helping her navigate the rough terrain. Behind them, something roared. It was a sound that made Jake's skin crawl. A deep, hungry sound that spoke of violence and death. Shadow maws, Sorn gasped as they ran. 3 of them. Maybe more. If they catch us, we're all dead. Commander Vex turned around, his massive gun raised. Then we fight. Kragoth warriors don't run from animals. You don't understand, Sorn said desperately. Shadow maws are apex predators. They've killed trained warriors from a dozen species. The only reason they don't rule this planet is because we keep them contained in the deep forests. Another roar, closer this time. The group emerged into a clearing. On the far side, Jake could see the path that led back to the lodge. Perhaps a mile away, but between them and safety, 3 massive shapes emerged from the trees. The shadow maws were the stuff of nightmares. Each one was the size of a horse, but built low to the ground like a wolf. They had 6 legs ending in claws that looked like curved knives. Their bodies were covered in armored plates that overlapped like scales. Their heads were all teeth and hunger, with eyes that glowed a faint yellow in the shadows. The largest shadow maw, covered in old scars, moved ahead of the other 2. Keeper Sorn whispered, "Old Terror. The oldest and most dangerous predator in the reserve. It has killed over 40 warriors who tried to hunt it." Princess Lorana grabbed Jake's arm. Her face was pale with fear. "Morrison, get back. Please. Just get back. These things will kill you in seconds." Commander Vex and his warriors formed a defensive line. They opened fire, and the forest lit up with energy blasts and projectile rounds. The shots hit the shadow maws, and Jake saw some of them penetrate the armored hides, but the creatures barely slowed down. Old Terror roared again and began to charge. The other 2 shadow maws spread out, circling the group. It was a hunting formation, Jake realized. These things weren't just strong. They were intelligent. "This is it," Vex growled. "Kragath, prepare for close combat. We'll take as many of them with us as we can." Princess Lorana's hand tightened on Jake's arm. She was shaking. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I brought you here." Jake gently removed her hand from his arm. He checked his rifle and started walking forward, toward the shadow maws. "Morrison, no!" Lorana screamed. "Come back! You'll die!" But Jake kept walking. He had faced worse things than monsters. He just needed to make sure these creatures understood one simple fact. They weren't the only predators in this clearing. Jake walked steadily toward the shadow maws. Behind him, he could hear Princess Lorana shouting his name, begging him to come back. Commander Vex was yelling orders to his warriors, preparing for a final stand. But Jake tuned it all out. He had learned long ago how to focus in dangerous situations. The 3 shadow maws paused their advance. Old Terror, the scarred leader, tilted its massive head, studying the approaching human. Its yellow eyes tracked Jake's every movement. The other 2 creatures stopped circling and turned their attention to him as well. Jake kept his rifle lowered but ready. He wasn't aiming at the creatures yet. That would be seen as direct aggression, and while these things were dangerous, they were still animals. Animals followed patterns. Animals understood certain rules. He stopped walking when he was about 20 feet from Old Terror. The massive predator was even more terrifying up close. Its armored hide bore the scars of countless fights. Its claws dug into the earth with each breath. Saliva dripped from its jaws, filled with teeth that could tear through metal. Jake stood still and met the creature's eyes. This was the most important moment. In the wild, predators made decisions based on threat assessment. They calculated whether prey was worth the energy and risk required to take it down. Jake needed to make himself look like very bad prey. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He barely breathed. This was something he had learned during survival training in Death Valley. Back on Earth, when you encountered a predator, you had 2 choices: become invisible or become something too dangerous to attack. Old Terror took a step forward. Its lips pulled back, revealing even more teeth. It was testing him, trying to determine what this strange creature was. Jake's mind flashed back to a night 5 years ago. He had been on a training exercise in the African wilderness. His unit had been learning how to survive in hostile environments. They had encountered a pride of lions. The instructor had made them stand their ground, maintaining eye contact, making themselves look larger and more dangerous than they were. Predators respect other predators, the instructor had said. Show them you're not afraid, and sometimes they'll decide you're not worth the trouble. Of course, that instructor had also mentioned that this technique didn't always work. Old Terror circled to the left. Jake turned with it, maintaining eye contact. The creature was massive, probably weighing close to 1,000 pounds. Its armor could deflect most weapons. If it decided to attack, Jake would have maybe 2 seconds to react. One of the other Shadow Maws, younger and more aggressive, snarled and started to move forward. Old Terror immediately snapped its head toward the younger creature, and made a sharp barking sound. The younger Shadow Maw stopped and lowered its head submissively. Jake understood. Old Terror was the pack leader, and it had just told the younger one to back off. This was still its decision to make. The massive predator turned back to Jake. It took another step closer, so close now that Jake could smell its breath. It smelled like blood and decay. Old Terror's nostrils flared as it sniffed the air around him. This was it. This was the moment when the creature would decide. Jake thought about Earth. He thought about the world that had created humanity. It wasn't a gentle world. It wasn't a world of safety barriers and controlled hunting grounds. Earth was a planet where humans had to fight for survival every single day. Humans had shared their world with creatures that could kill them in dozens of ways. Great white sharks that could bite through boats. Crocodiles that could drag prey underwater and drown them. Bears that could tear through solid wood. Snakes with venom that could kill in minutes. Tigers, lions, leopards, wolves, and countless other predators that saw humans as food. And yet, humans had survived. More than survived. They had become the dominant species on a planet filled with creatures stronger, faster, and more dangerous than they were. They had done it through intelligence, through persistence, through an absolute refusal to give up. Humans were predators too. They might not have claws or armor, but they had something else. They had the mindset of survivors who had earned their place at the top of the food chain. Old Terror could smell all of that. Animals understood things that words couldn't express. The Shadow Maw could smell the generations of evolution that had created Jake Morrison. It could sense the history written into his very biology. The massive creature's eyes narrowed. Its body language changed subtly. The aggressive tension in its muscles started to relax. Then Old Terror did something that made everyone watching gasp in shock. It lowered its head. Just slightly, just enough to break eye contact for a moment. In the language of predators, it was a gesture of acknowledgement. Not submission exactly, but recognition of an equal. Old Terror backed up 3 steps. Its yellow eyes stayed fixed on Jake, but the hunting intent was gone. The creature was treating Jake the way it might treat another apex predator whose territory it had accidentally entered. With caution and respect, the 2 younger Shadow Maws looked confused. They glanced at their leader, then at Jake, unsure of what to do. Old Terror made that sharp barking sound again, and the younger creatures immediately started backing away. Jake still didn't move. He kept his eyes on Old Terror, maintaining that silent communication between predators. The message was clear. I'm not prey. I'm not something you want to fight. Find easier food elsewhere. Old Terror took another step backward, then another. The creature kept its eyes on Jake for a few more seconds, then turned and melted into the forest. The 2 younger Shadow Maws followed immediately. Within moments, all 3 creatures were gone, leaving only trampled grass and claw marks in the earth. Jake stood still for another 30 seconds, making sure they were really gone. Then he turned and walked back toward the group. His hands were steady, his expression calm, as if nothing unusual had just happened. Princess Lyrana stood frozen, her mouth open in shock. Commander Vex and his warriors had lowered their weapons but looked just as stunned. Keeper Sorn was shaking his head slowly, as if trying to convince himself that what he had just witnessed was real. How? Lyrana finally managed to speak. How did you do that? Jake checked his rifle, making sure it was still in good condition. Do what, Your Highness? Those were Shadow Maws. Old Terror has killed warriors who had decades of combat experience. And it just backed away from you. We should head back to the lodge, Jake said calmly. The barriers are still down, and there might be other predators in the area. Commander Vex stepped forward. His red eyes studied Jake with new interest. You're no rookie, are you, human? I just graduated from the academy 2 months ago, sir. That's not what I mean. Vex's voice had lost all traces of mockery. What were you before the academy? Jake met the commander's gaze. Does it matter? It matters to me. I've fought on 100 battlefields, faced death more times than I can count. But I've never seen anything like what just happened. That creature recognized something in you. Something that scared it. Vex crossed his forearms. What did it see? Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he said simply, "It saw Earth." The group made it back to the lodge without further incident. Emergency crews were already working to repair the barrier generators. The reserve's management team was apologetic and horrified that guests had been endangered. Princess Lirana assured them that no one was hurt, but Jake noticed that she kept glancing at him with a strange expression. That evening, there was supposed to be a formal dinner at the lodge. But before it started, Princess Lirana found Jake in the hallway. She was alone, without her usual attendants. "I need to know something," she said quietly. "And I need you to tell me the truth." "Of course, Your Highness." "What are you really? Because you're not just some young graduate on his first assignment. That was obvious today." She looked directly into his eyes. "What is Earth? What kind of world creates someone like you?" Jake considered his answer carefully. "Earth is home, Your Highness. That's all. Don't give me diplomatic answers, Morrison. I saw what happened today. Old Terror is the most dangerous predator on this planet, and it treated you like you were something even more dangerous." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "What kind of world do humans come from?" Jake looked out the window at the darkening forest. "A world that tried to kill us, Your Highness. Every day, for hundreds of thousands of years, Earth tried to kill us. And we survived anyway." Princess Lirana couldn't sleep that night. She lay in her luxurious room at the lodge, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene from the forest over and over in her mind. Old Terror backing away. That impossible moment when the most dangerous predator on Valoria had retreated from a human. Finally, at 3 in the morning, she gave up trying to sleep. She got out of bed and went to her personal terminal. She pulled up Jake Morrison's file. The one she had barely glanced at before the summit started. The basic information was simple enough. Jake Morrison, age 23. Recent graduate of Earth's Interstellar Defense Academy. But now Lirana read deeper, looking at the sections she had skipped before. Previous service: Earth Marine Corps, Special Forces Division, 5 years of active duty. Lirana paused. 5 years? That meant Jake had joined the Marines when he was only 18. She kept reading. Deployments: 3 separate conflict zones during humanity's colonial expansion period. Commendations for combat operations in hostile environments. Advanced survival training including 2 years in Earth's Death Valley program. Death Valley program? Lirana had never heard of it. She opened a search window and looked it up. What she found made her blood run cold. Death Valley was a training ground on Earth where temperatures regularly exceeded 130 degrees Fahrenheit. The program forced trainees to survive in one of the harshest environments on the planet with minimal equipment. The failure rate was over 60%. Many trainees died during the program, even with safety measures in place. But that wasn't what shocked Lirana. What shocked her was the description of Death Valley itself. It was just one small part of Earth, and yet it was classified as a Class 9 hazard zone. Most species in the galaxy would consider such a place uninhabitable. She dug deeper into Earth's classification files. What she found should have been impossible. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world. Lirana had studied xenobiology in her youth. She knew what the classification system meant. A Class 1 world was perfectly safe and hospitable. A Class 5 world had some dangerous elements but was generally manageable. A Class 10 world was considered extremely hazardous, suitable only for the most robust species. There were only 17 Class 12 worlds known to the Galactic Council. Most of them were forbidden zones, where no intelligent life could survive for long. And yet, Earth had produced an entire civilization. Billions of humans lived on that nightmare planet and considered it normal. She started reading about Earth's native life. The more she read, the more horrified she became. Great white sharks. Apex predators capable of biting through solid metal with pressures exceeding 2 tons per square inch. They hunted in Earth's oceans, which covered 70% of the planet. Saltwater crocodiles. Ambush predators with the strongest bite force of any living creature on Earth. They could remain perfectly still for hours, then explode into motion fast enough to catch birds in mid-flight. Grizzly bears, massive predators weighing up to 800 pounds, capable of running at speeds of 35 miles per hour and tearing through solid wood with their claws. Tigers, lions, leopards, jaguars, large cats that hunted through stealth and power, capable of taking down prey twice their size. Hippos, herbivores so aggressive and territorial that they killed more humans than any other large animal on Earth. Venomous snakes, spiders, scorpions, jellyfish, and countless other creatures that could kill humans in minutes. The list went on and on. Earth wasn't just a death world. It was a nightmare planet, filled with hundreds of apex predators, all competing for survival. And humans had evolved right alongside all of them. Lirana opened a communication link to her chief science advisor, a elderly Veloxian named Scholar Kren. She didn't care that it was the middle of the night. "Your Highness," Kren answered, his voice groggy with sleep. "Is something wrong? I need you to explain something to me. Why didn't anyone tell us that Earth is a Class 12 death world?" There was a long pause. "Your Highness, that information is in the public records. It's not a secret. Then why doesn't anyone talk about it? Why are humans treated like naive newcomers when they come from one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy?" Kren sighed. "Because most people don't understand what those classifications really mean. Your Highness. They see that humans look relatively fragile. Compared to species like the Kragoth, they see that human technology is less advanced than ours. They assume humans are weak, but they're not weak. No, Your Highness, they are not. Humans are persistence predators." "Do you know what that means?" Lirana shook her head, then realized Kren couldn't see her through the audio link. "No. Most predators hunt through speed or strength or ambush. They catch their prey quickly, or not at all. But persistence predators are different. They hunt by simply refusing to give up. Humans evolved to chase their prey for hours, sometimes days, until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. No other apex predator on Earth could do this. Humans could." Kren's voice grew more serious. "But that's not the most frightening thing about humans, Your Highness. The most frightening thing is that they're not specialized. They're not the strongest or the fastest or the most venomous. They survived on Earth by being adaptable, by learning, by using tools and strategy and cooperation. They're intelligent predators," Lirana said quietly. "Yes. And intelligent predators are the most dangerous kind. The shadow maw that you encountered today is powerful, but it's predictable. It follows its instincts. Humans evolved to overcome their instincts, to plan, to adapt. That's why they became the dominant species on a planet that should have killed them thousands of years ago." Lorana thought about Jake standing in front of Old Terror. That calm, steady presence. That absolute confidence. The Shadow Maw recognized this? "Animals are very good at recognizing predators, Your Highness." Old Terror sensed that the human was dangerous in ways it couldn't fully understand. So it made the smart choice. It left. After ending the call with Scholar Kren, Lirana spent the rest of the night reading about Earth. She learned about humanity's history, about their wars and struggles, about how they had fought their way from caves to starships. She read about how humans had domesticated wolves, turning apex predators into loyal companions, how they had developed agriculture by understanding plant biology better than the plants themselves, how they had created art and music and philosophy while still fighting for survival every single day. She read about Earth's environment. The planet had extreme temperature variations, from frozen wastelands to scorching deserts. It had violent weather systems that could level cities. It had earthquakes and volcanoes and tsunamis. And yet humans had spread across every continent, adapting to every environment. By dawn, Lirana understood. Humans weren't rookies. They were survivors from a world that had forged them in fire and blood and endless struggle. They had been tested in ways that most galactic species couldn't even imagine. The summit's formal sessions resumed that afternoon. But the atmosphere had changed dramatically. Word had spread about the incident at the hunting reserve. Other delegates approached Jake with new interest, asking questions about Earth and human culture. Commander Vex found Jake in a hallway between sessions. The massive Kragoth warrior looked uncomfortable. which was unusual for him. Morrison, Vex said formally. I owe you an apology. Jake stopped walking. That's not necessary, sir. Yes, it is. I called you a rookie. I mocked your species. I treated you with disrespect. Vex crossed his forearms. I was wrong. Any warrior who can face down Old Terror without firing a shot is no rookie. I appreciate that, Commander. I've been speaking with my superiors. The Kragoth Warrior Guild would like to offer you a position. We seek warriors from all species who prove themselves worthy. The pay is excellent, and the honor is even better. Jake considered this. It was a genuine offer, and a rare one. The Kragoth were extremely selective about who they allowed into their ranks. But he shook his head. Thank you, Commander. But I'm committed to Earth's defense forces. Vex nodded, as if he had expected this answer. Loyal to your world. That's good. That's how warriors should be. He extended one of his hands. But perhaps we can be allies instead? Jake shook the offered hand. It was like gripping a piece of living rock. I'd like that, sir. After Vex left, Princess Lirana appeared. She had been watching the exchange from a distance. Walk with me, she said softly. It wasn't a request. They walked through the summit compound's gardens. The violet sky of Valoria glowed above them as the planet's sun began to set. I couldn't sleep last night, Lirana admitted. So I read your file. Your real file. Not just the summary I glanced at before. I see. You're not just a recent academy graduate, are you? You're a veteran warrior who went back to school to qualify for diplomatic assignments. Jake nodded. The Marine Corps pays for education. I wanted to expand my career options. 5 years in combat zones. Multiple commendations. Advanced survival training in some of the most hostile environments on your planet. Lirana stopped walking and turned to face him. Why didn't you tell anyone? No one asked, Your Highness. And honestly, it didn't seem relevant. I was assigned to provide security. My past experience helps me do that job better. But it's not something I need to advertise. Lirana was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I was wrong about you. I thought you were just a rookie. Someone inexperienced who needed protection. I was going to look after you during the summit. Make sure you didn't get into trouble. You were being kind. I was being condescending. She smiled sadly. It turns out you're probably more qualified to protect me than I am to protect you. The final days of the summit proceeded very differently than the first few days had. Jake noticed the changes immediately. Delegates who had ignored him before now acknowledged him in hallways. Guards from other species nodded with respect when they saw him. Even the serving staff treated him differently. Commander Vex made a point of sitting near the Earth delegation during formal sessions. The massive Kragoth warrior would occasionally lean over and ask Jake questions about Earth's military training or combat techniques. Other delegates noticed and took note. But the biggest change was in how people talked about Earth itself. Before the incident at the hunting reserve, most species had viewed humanity as inexperienced newcomers, barely worthy of their small seat at the Galactic Council. Now, conversations about Earth carried a different tone. Jake overheard 2 delegates talking in the cafeteria. One was a bird-like creature from the Avian Collective. The other was a floating being made of what looked like living crystal. Did you read the report on Earth's classification? The bird creature asked. Class 12 Death World, the crystal being replied. I checked the database last night. There are only 16 other planets with that classification, and none of them have produced spacefaring civilizations. It makes you wonder what else we've underestimated about humans. Jake got his food and moved away before they could notice him listening. He found a quiet corner and sat down to eat. A moment later, Princess Lirana approached with her own tray. May I join you? She asked. Of course, Your Highness. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Lirana said, The Veloxian Empire's High Council met this morning. They want to establish a deeper alliance with Earth. Jake looked up from his food. That's significant. Very significant. We don't make such offers lightly. Lirana smiled. My mother, the Empress, specifically mentioned you in her message. She said anyone who can make old terror back down without violence is someone we want as a friend, not a potential enemy. I wasn't trying to make a political statement. I was just trying to keep everyone safe. I know. That's part of what impressed her. Lirana paused. Can I ask you something personal? Go ahead. When you were standing in front of those shadow maws, were you afraid? Jake thought about this carefully. Yes, he admitted. I was afraid. Those creatures were dangerous. And I could have died. Fear is natural, but you didn't show it. You didn't run. Fear doesn't have to control you. It can inform you, help you make better decisions. But I learned a long time ago that panic is more dangerous than most predators. He met her eyes. Running would have triggered their hunting instinct. Standing my ground gave me a chance. Most people can't do that. Most species would have run or fought. They wouldn't have been able to stay calm. Humans evolved as persistence predators, Jake explained. We're not the strongest or fastest, so we had to develop other advantages. Patience, endurance, the ability to stay focused under pressure. Those traits got passed down through thousands of generations. Lirana shook her head in wonder. Your world made you what you are. All worlds make their people what they are, Jake replied. Valoria is beautiful and relatively safe. It created a civilization that values art and diplomacy and culture. That's not better or worse than what Earth created. It's just different. But Earth's difference makes your people dangerous. Jake was quiet for a moment. Maybe. Or maybe it makes us survivors. Humans aren't interested in conquering the galaxy, Your Highness. We're interested in finding our place in it. We've spent our entire history fighting just to stay alive. Now that we've reached space, we'd rather make friends than enemies. That's very diplomatic of you. I'm being honest. War is expensive and ugly. I've seen enough combat to know I don't want any more of it unless absolutely necessary. Most humans feel the same way. He smiled slightly. We had to fight for millions of years just to survive on our own planet. We'd like to try something different out here among the stars. That evening, there was a final formal dinner to close the summit. Jake wore his dress uniform and stood at his assigned position near the wall. But this time, when Princess Lirana gave her closing speech, she did something unexpected. She called Jake forward. Ladies and gentlemen of the Galactic Council, Lirana said, her voice carrying across the large hall. This summit has reminded us all of an important lesson. We must not judge species by their age or appearance. We must recognize that newcomers to our community may have strengths we don't immediately see. Jake stood awkwardly in front of hundreds of alien dignitaries while Lirana continued. The human standing before you prevented a tragedy at my family's reserve. He faced one of the most dangerous predators on Valoria with courage and wisdom. He reminded us that strength comes in many forms. She turned to Jake. Morrison, on behalf of the Valoxian Empire, I present you with this. An attendant brought forward a small box. Lirana opened it and removed a medallion on a silver chain. The medallion was made of some crystal material that glowed with inner light. This is a Valoxian diplomatic seal, Lirana explained. It grants you access to Valoxian space and marks you as a friend of our empire. It's given only to those who have earned our deepest trust. Jake accepted the medallion with a bow. Your Highness, I'm honored. The honor is ours. Lirana smiled. And I apologize for initially viewing you as just a rookie. I should have known better than to judge anyone before understanding them fully. The hall erupted in polite applause. Jake returned to his position, the medallion heavy around his neck. Commander Vex caught his eye and nodded with approval. Other delegates smiled or raised their drinks in salute. Later that night, Jake stood on an observation deck overlooking Valoria's capital city. The alien metropolis glowed with lights of every color, and the planet's 3 moons hung in the violet sky like watchful eyes. Princess Lirana found him there. She seemed to have a talent for appearing when he was alone. Leaving tomorrow? She asked. Yes, Your Highness. My transport departs at dawn. Will you be at future summits? Probably not. This was a special assignment. I'll likely return to normal duty after this. Lirana leaned against the railing beside him. That's a shame. I was hoping we'd work together again. They stood in silence for a while, watching the city below. Finally, Lirana said, I learned something important this week. I learned that the galaxy is bigger and more complicated than I thought. That species I dismissed as young and inexperienced might actually have more wisdom than civilizations 10 times their age. Every species has something to teach, Jake said. Humans are good at surviving, but we have a lot to learn about diplomacy and culture and building lasting peace. That's why we're here, at summits like this. We want to learn from species like the Veloxians. And what can we learn from humans? Jake thought about this. Maybe resilience, maybe adaptability, or maybe just the reminder that being civilized doesn't mean forgetting how to be strong. The galaxy seems relatively peaceful now, but that peace was built by warriors who fought to create it. Sometimes it's useful to remember that those skills still exist. Lirana nodded slowly. The Galactic Council has been at peace for 300 years. Some of our member species have forgotten what real danger looks like. They've become comfortable. Comfort isn't a bad thing. No. But neither is being prepared. She turned to look at him. Earth is going to change the balance of power in this galaxy, Morrison. Maybe not this year or next year. But eventually, when other species realize what you really are, when they understand that humans are survivors from a death world who refuse to die, everything will shift. That's not our goal. I know. But it will happen anyway. She smiled. For what it's worth, I'm glad. The galaxy could use a species that remembers how to be both kind and dangerous. It's a rare combination. The next morning, Jake boarded his transport back to Earth. As the ship lifted off from Valoria's surface, he looked down at the purple planet growing smaller beneath him. It had been an interesting week, full of surprises and lessons. He thought about Old Terror, about that moment when Predator recognized Predator. He thought about Princess Lirana's evolution, from viewing him as a naive rookie to treating him as an equal. He thought about Commander Vex's respect and the weight of the diplomatic seal around his neck. But mostly, he thought about home. About Earth, with its oceans full of sharks, and its forests full of bears, and its deserts that could kill you in hours. About a planet so dangerous that just surviving there had turned humans into what they were. The galaxy saw humanity as rookies, as newcomers, barely worthy of notice. And in many ways, that was true. Humans were young, inexperienced in galactic politics, still learning how to navigate the complex web of alliances and rivalries that made up the Galactic Council. But rookies could learn. Rookies could adapt. And humans were very, very good at adapting. As the transport entered faster than light travel, Jake closed his eyes and let himself relax. The summit was over. He had done his job, and he had shown the galaxy, in a small way, that humanity was worth paying attention to. Not because humans were the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced, but because they were survivors from a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years, and they had won. The galaxy would learn, just as the Shadowmaws had learned, just as Princess Lirana had learned, just as Commander Vex had learned. Humanity was here to stay. And they carried with them the strength of Earth, the resilience of a species that had earned every single step of their journey to the stars. They might be rookies now, but they wouldn't be rookies forever. And when they finally came into their own, when they fully claimed their place among the galactic powers, the universe would remember this moment, the moment when a young human named Jake Morrison stood his ground against apex predators and made them back away. The moment when the galaxy realized that humanity was more than they appeared, the moment when everything changed. Jake smiled to himself as the transport carried him home. It was good to be alive. It was good to represent his species. And it was good to know that somewhere out there, in forests across Valoria, Old Terror was probably telling its pack about the strange predator it had met. The predator from Earth, the predator that refused to be prey.